Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with justice for all. Greet your neighbors. Our invocation today will be given by Major Connie Higgins.
Let's pray. Lord, we are thankful for this day that you have given to us, for its many blessings, its many opportunities, and its many challenges. May we appreciate and use each day that comes to us. We pray for strength and guidance for today and each day as it comes, for each day's duties and for each day's problems. May we be challenged to give our best always, and may we be assured of your presence with us always. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Connie. Well, welcome back, everybody. What a great weekend we had weather-wise. It was really nice. So hopefully everybody got a chance to get outdoors and enjoy it a little bit. I know I did. I got a little bit of yard work done. So just a couple of announcements here. So one of the things we did, I know I did over the weekend, I went out to do a little spring pipe marking. So yesterday I was out and about in several different neighborhoods. It's kind of a nice way to interact with our subscribers. You don't see people most of the time, but sometimes somebody will come out and talk about the flag project, and it really makes you understand that people really do take this seriously. People want their flags and they appreciate their flags. So Brent was out yesterday with Ryan, and they were doing some spring pipe marking. So it sounds as if you got through quite a few sites yesterday, about 50 or so. So we appreciate your help with that. Regarding the flag project, so just a couple important dates coming up. So those of you that are participating in the pipe marking, try to finish those up by the end of the day on Sunday, which is May 22nd, and let Brent know when you're finished with those. Saturday, May 21st, this coming Saturday, and Monday the 23rd, we're going to be distributing flags to the community groups. They'll be coming out to our facility there to get their flags for the season. And then Tuesday through Thursday, May 24th through 26th, that's when they'll place the flags for Memorial Day. So that's a 3-day period. We usually do 2 days. For Memorial Day, we do 3 because it's the first time for a lot of groups, and it usually takes a little longer. One of the key things highlighted in yellow there is our troubleshooting, which will occur over that period as well. We still are looking for more volunteers for that. I think I looked at the sign up this morning, we only had about 4. We need more people for troubleshooting. So really all troubleshooting is when maybe somebody will call in and say they were missed, or a group will report that they couldn't find the pipe at a particular location. So we send a troubleshooter out to that address with some flags. And they either try to find the pipe and place the flag, or if we can't find the pipe, we need to install a new one. But not everybody who helps with troubleshooting needs to be able to install the pipes. We have people that can go out and do that if you really can't find it. So that's definitely a need for help that we're going to have coming up. The other date that I want to make sure people are aware of is that this Wednesday is the last day to renew your flag subscription. So if you haven't renewed or paid your flag subscription for next year, if you want a flag for Memorial Day, you have to have it in by Wednesday. So you can contact Becky Foster if you haven't renewed and you need to renew. This came out in my weekly email, but just to save the date, Monday, August 8th, we're going to have our Meals with a Mission at TJ's. So that'll be in lieu of the Monday meeting that week. More information to follow on times and so forth, but I just wanted to put that out there so you can save the date. Today in history, May 16th, 1965, SpaghettiOs were sold for the first time. So I don't know, you probably can't read that, but the little ad there says, it's a nourishing hot lunch. So I'm not so sure about the nourishing part, but it can be a hot lunch or cold. But I remember those from my childhood, so I thought that was interesting. So Katie is filling in for Lynn today. So I'm going to have Katie come up with the secretary's report. And I think it's going to be short.
Yeah. Good thing when you put the red shirt in, it's a short secretary's duty today. Our guest will be introduced by Chris Bueller when he introduces our speaker, but we'd also like to welcome Ryan again from the College of Wooster. That's it.
You can introduce your guest now. No, just
Okay.
Okay,
I'll just introduce my guests here real quick. So I've got my wife, Libby Bueller, and they're both National Park aficionados, so I brought them today. But Libby, and then our Director of HR, Liz Bradham, who's, I don't think he's here today, but her husband is also a Rotarian. So welcome.
Katie and Chris. And welcome to our guests. I hope you enjoyed today's program in the Fellowship of Wooster Rotary. So with that, I guess I'm going to call Christopher back up to the podium here to introduce today's speaker.
Okay. Historian Wallace Stegner once said that national parks are the best idea we ever had. Absolutely American, absolutely democratic. They reflect us at our best rather than our worst. Today's speaker has, in my opinion, one of the best jobs in the world, managing a national park, and not just any national park, but Ohio's only national park, Cuyahoga Valley. Many of us in the room know the park well and have visited several times, but I often hear from those that I talk to that, quote, I don't make it up there as often as I'd like to. Today, you'll hear more about the park and its recent happenings, so hopefully you'll have yet another excuse to go visit. Today's speaker has been with Cuyahoga Valley National Park since the year 2000. She first served as wildlife biologist and then as Chief of Natural and Cultural Resources, Deputy Superintendent, and now as Superintendent since July of 2021. Prior to joining the National Park Service, she was a research biologist for 8 years with the Smithsonian Institute Migratory Bird Center in Washington, D.C. Her research and management careers have now intertwined to address restoration and resource protection within the challenging context of a national park, surrounded by a metropolitan area of approximately 3 million people. She received a Bachelor of Science in Zoology from the Ohio State University, a Master of Science in Biology from Bowling Green State University, and a PhD in Zoology from the University of Arkansas. She enjoys hiking, birding, and fishing with her husband and research collaborator, Dan, as well as spending time with her college-age daughters. And for those of you that don't know, she's actually a Doylestown native. So today it's my pleasure to introduce to you today's speaker, Lisa Petit, Superintendent of Cuyahoga Valley National Park.
Thanks, Christopher. And thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to be here, and especially because you probably recognize the name Petit. And that isn't my maiden name, but I'm married to Dan Petit, who is a native Doylestown, one of the many, many, many Petits from Doylestown. And it's really wonderful for us to be here, for me to be here, and especially because Dan and I came home to Northeast Ohio after being away for many, many years in Arkansas and in Washington, D.C. We spent a lot of our time outside of the country as well, in Belize and Panama. And so coming home is really special for us. And for me to come home to Cuyahoga Valley National Park was really special as well for me to become the superintendent of a park that I kind of grew up in. It was my first National Park Service position, and I really didn't know much about the National Park Service as an agency, but I had always done work with birds or in research that tied back to the public lands, either here or in Latin America. And I connected conservation of birds, in my case, to the way that we preserve land and the importance of that land for people as well as for wildlife and the natural world. So parks like Cuyahoga Valley National Park are so critical for conservation, and it really has been coming home. It's a labor of love for me to be in this park. Dan and I have been married tomorrow 36 years. So I have been, thank you. So, you know, Ohio is really my home. I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., but Ohio is really my home and my adopted home. So with that, I just wanted to kind of introduce you. Maybe some of you may have been at Cuyahoga Valley National Park, maybe frequent visitors, maybe you haven't actually ever been there or don't know that much about it. So what I wanted to do is talk to you a little bit about who we are and what we do and where we're headed in the future. You'll see from the slide here, Cuyahoga Valley National Park was established officially in 1974 as a unit of the National Park Service. We were first called a national recreation area, and that was very confusing. But nonetheless, in 2000, Congressman Ralph Regula championed some legislation to change the name to Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and that was mainly for name recognition. We'll get into that a little bit. But in 1974, in the late 60s and 1970s, the National Park Service, which of course was America's best idea and had a long tradition since the establishment of Yellowstone, you know, in the 1800s, before the National Park Service was even created. The sort of idea of the national parks was these large, pristine, remote areas that preserved the greatest, most pristine natural resources, usually, of the country. So they were remote. Most of them were out west, and most people couldn't actually get to those remote areas, or if they did, it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. It was very difficult to get to them. So in the 60s and 70s, the National Park Service decided we need to change the model of how we bring people to parks, and instead we're going to bring national park units to the people. So multiple areas were established in large population centers and cities like Cleveland to bring parks to the people. We were in amongst a handful, maybe about half dozen national park units that were established at that time, from Gateway National Recreation Area in New York to Golden Gate National Recreation Area in San Francisco. There was Acadia National Park, actually was one of the parks and people. And we, through the championing of John Seiberling and Ralph Regula, became one of the parks of the people, Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area, because of our proximity to a large population in Cleveland and Akron and Canton for Mr. Regula. When Congress drew the boundary around what would become the National Recreation Area, they created a big old mosaic of ownership, or essentially drew it around all kinds of lived-in spaces This was a great deal of conflict and difficulty in the beginning and the birth of this park. But they created this boundary that enveloped essentially the valley of the Cuyahoga River between Akron to the south and Cleveland to the north. And you can see from this mosaic all the different types of ownerships that are going on inside this boundary. We are also nestled inside, so you'll see in the middle one, that's all the ownership within the boundary of the national park. And then you'll see from on the right-hand side, we are also embedded within a larger National Park Service oriented or owned entity called the Ohio and Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor, the Canalway Heritage Corridor, that extends all the way down to New Philadelphia along the former Ohio and Erie Canal. That came much later after we were established. But you can see from all the different colors, the green is the National Park Service land, and that we only own about 2/3 of what is currently inside the boundary in a real patchwork of ownership, as you can see. The large areas that are yellow are the metro parks. So in the northern part in Cuyahoga County, that's the Cleveland Metro Parks. And then toward the south or the southern half of the park, you've got the Summit County Metro Parks. All in between large red areas. I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but you have Boy Scout and Girl Scout camps in the center of the park. You have Blossom Music Center down in the south. So they are colored red, but because they are in private ownership, but we consider those compatible lands with parks. And then you do, of course, have a lot of private land, especially in the north, that is owned by private citizens. So a huge patchwork and a huge complexity of ownership. We are actually surrounded by 15 municipalities, whether it's cities, villages, townships, all those different jurisdictions actually intertwine with the national park boundary. And there are 2 counties, Cuyahoga and Summit. Total 33,000 acres, but only, again, about 20,000 acres owned by the federal government. So this becomes an interesting puzzle and an interesting challenge for a national park superintendent or for the agency to manage this kind of a situation. And this was a very different situation than the big millions of acres of essentially isolated national parks that you find out west and in most of the original national park situations. But we are just like, at Cuyahoga Valley National Park, we have exactly the same overarching law that governs us as Yosemite, Yellowstone, Acadia, any of the national parks have the same overarching law called the Organic Act that established us in 1916. And it says these words, essentially, that we will conserve all of those natural and cultural resources and wildlife therein, and we will leave them unimpaired. There's a challenge for you. Unimpaired forever for the enjoyment of future generations. So we're at our very heart a preservation organization. That's what we're about, preserving the features, the resources that we're entrusted with for the enjoyment of future generations. A lot of loaded words in that law. So at Cuyahoga Valley, we do that very same thing. We are entrusted with the preservation of our stunning natural features. Yes, even in Northeast Ohio, even around the Cleveland area, for the rest of the country, we do have outstanding natural resources in our geology, in the river itself, and especially in that story of the comeback of this Cuyahoga River that was on fire in the 60s and is now quite an environmental success story. We also preserve the heritage of Northeast Ohio, prehistoric as well as historic, with the Ohio Indian Canal, the Valley Railway, the prehistoric people that were in the area, the historic families that were here of all different ethnic backgrounds, and all the stories that come from the special people of this place and the events that have happened that shape us in Northeast Ohio. And also that's what the National Park Service does. Those kinds of, the preservation of those kinds of stories across the country, important changing events. But mostly we're known for the recreation. We were established as a recreation area, and all of the recreational opportunities that we provide, that's really what most people know us when they have visited. They know us for the recreational opportunities that we give. So we have a very nice and fairly unique situation in the national park where we can offer recreation along the Ohio Indian Canal Towpath Trail. We can offer it along the Valley Railroad with a scenic railway, and then we have connections between those two, as well as hiking, 125 miles of hiking trails. The towpath is our most popular area, but we also offer now a Cuyahoga River water trail. We are a segment of a state designated water trail. So paddling is now an opportunity, and we can connect you through the train to multimodal uses. So you can take your bike on the train, go one way, and then bike back to your car. You can do the same with a kayak and paddle back while riding, after riding the train, etc. So hike, bike, paddling, we have equestrian trails, quite a large variety of recreational opportunities. But we couldn't get any of this done without our close operating partners. First and foremost is our Friends Group, the Conservancy for Cuyahoga Valley National Park. And that is how Christopher and I know each other, is because he is a board member for the Conservancy. And I'm very excited that he asked me to be here to talk with all of you. But the Conservancy has been one of the key elements of our success as a national park. They have raised the bar on our professionalism. They have been advocates for us in terms of fundraising and donations. They are, we could not do what we do without their assistance. And they raised the profile of us in the country with our legislators, with our communities. They run, jointly with us, they run environmental education. We have one of the largest, second or third largest volunteer programs, with most recently up to about 7,000 volunteers giving us 200,000 hours worth of their time, translating to millions of dollars worth of capacity and assistance to the national park, co-led with the Conservancy. Everything they touch basically is golden for us, and they bring us up so high. They increase the relevance, they increase the reach to our communities beyond our boundary, and they're especially helping us reach communities we haven't reached very well in the past, in the inner cities of Cleveland and Akron and Canton. We also have, well, most recently actually, they are becoming our land trust as well. So they not only were able to fundraise over $7 million to help us acquire and rehabilitate a historic structure for our visitor center, the first ever sort of centralized orientation center, which you can see in this one picture, which is incredibly popular, obviously, and a great starting point for visitors who come to the park, as well as just recently reaching LEED certification, I believe we just learned, which is also stellar. And now they're in the process, they have purchased 200 acres in the heart of the national park, and we are working, excuse me, to be able to acquire that from the Conservancy. And they're helping us establish, again, a stellar example of park making as we add that 207 prime acres to our national park. Again, through donations, foundations, all private money going to help us build this park and expand this park. We have two other key operating partners. The first is Countryside Food and Farms. And this is a nonprofit who has helped us to preserve the rural countryside, the rural agricultural heritage of the national park. And we've done this in a very innovative and different, unique, really, across the Park Service, this partnership, to have them sort of help us manage agricultural lands through leasing, in a competitive leasing situation, to private farmers who come in and then develop sustainable agriculture, balancing the agriculture with being inside a national park. They run a farmer's market. They, again, extend our reach to people outside our boundary and make us more relevant. We're not just a national park. We are a national park that offers so many things, like a farmer's market that is so unique and so different. It's not just about coming and visiting a pristine area. It's more about community interaction, and that's what our partners help us do. Lastly, our Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad recently was being voted many years in a row within the top 10 of all scenic railroads across the country. And they offer another unique way to see the park, experience the park, and also help us as that alternative transportation. So they're keeping people, their parking is outside the park. They're using the train to move around in. And as I mentioned, they can move between these different types of uses, recreational uses, using the train for very inexpensive fares. So in 2020, we like to boast, we're in 2022 right now, but we keep looking back on 2020 because that was a banner year for us. That was during the height of COVID. We knew that, we discovered during that time, parks and open spaces became absolutely essential for the well-being of people to be able to get through that pandemic and, in a healthy way, be able to come to the national park. We became the #7 most visited unit called a national park. So among national parks, and there are 63 of those that are named national parks, there are 423 units of the National Park Service with all 50 different titles, battlefields and national recreation areas and national seashores, all that. But of those named national park, we were #7 most visited in the country during 2020. We were also, after establishment of our Cuyahoga River Water Trail, voted #1 urban kayaking experience in North America. So that included Canada as well as the US. And that was on the Cuyahoga River. We were voted that. To me, that is just an astounding milestone that was almost unimaginable. 10 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, it was unimaginable. And there we were. So we really are breaking out into the national onto the national stage, more than just that regional park, that park that was here for people in the Northeast Ohio area. We really are starting to reach a larger national audience. You can see there also number 4 on the USA Today Reader's Choice for the Scenic Railroad in 2021. I don't know where they landed yet. There are still voting going on for them this year, but I'm sure they will be again high up in top 10. So I think for this group especially, one of my visions as I step into this role and as I take up the charge from my predecessors and all that they have built in this Cuyahoga Valley National Park over the years, we're coming up now on our 50th anniversary. So we're about 48 years old, and we had some really tumultuous beginnings and really a lot of questioning as to whether we truly should be a national park. You know, that's not a national park. People come to see us and people who live around us, family members, think about, you know, that's not really a national park. That's not like, you know, these other ones that are really national parks. And so I really want to, as we go into our 50th anniversary and then beyond our 50th anniversary, my intention is to have us reach that potential as a national park. We are established as a national park. We are parks to the people, and we need to reach that full potential. What does that mean? What does a national park mean? What does it bring to people? We bring resources, obviously. No, we don't have that one cool thing. We don't have the mountains. We don't have the geysers. We don't have the things that people often associate with a specific national park, as that's the one thing. We don't have that one big thing, but we are still attracting more and more and more of that national visitor. So what are we bringing to the people? And the thing that a national park should bring is economic benefits. We should be an economic driver for the region, because we are bringing in people from outside the state, outside the region, and they should be spending their money in those communities. That's what national parks do. And that's what we do differently than a metro park potentially. People are coming to see a national park from outside. That's at least who we're trying to attract. We've always been a park for Northeast Ohio, and we now need to become a national park. So if you look at in 2020, this is an example of the visitor spending. So every year, the visitation, the number of visits, recreational visits to the park are captured, and the Park Service does an analysis across all national park units. And then they tell us what that shows. And so this is showing you the amount of visitor spending that comes to this park. It's 48.5 million in 2020. And you can see the breakdown of it. I think you can see on the right hand, hopefully, but at the top, it's very small. At the top, it says camping, then it's gas as you go top to down. So gas is the yellow, groceries is light green, hotels are red, recreation industries are pinkish, restaurants blue, retail, other retail is darker green, and then transportation is like a tan. And so you can see here, and this is typical for every park unit really, is people are spending most of their money on hotels or overnight accommodations and on restaurants. If we had more camping, they'd spend it on camping. And camping is one of the, well, that is the top request we are getting now for camping inside the national park. And camping, frankly, is one of those things that you expect. The national visitor expects camping opportunities when they come to a national park. So if we want to be a national park, somehow we're going to have to get camping to attract that national visitor who is expecting that. So $48.5 million in visitor spending. We were number 7 in the country with about 2.8 million visitors. Doesn't sound like a lot, but compared to other national park units, we were right up there. We're always in the top 10% of those things, those units called national parks. In 2020, we saw, and since then, we continue to see, we are actually attracting people who are coming to us because of the name National Park. They're starting to see us on Google. They're starting to see us as they make their way across the country for other reasons. They were coming more and more and more since 2020, and when people were doing more local travel or regional travel. They come for a variety of reasons. I've talked a little bit about it. They come with expectations. And most of the time we're seeing they come and the first thing they want to do is take their picture next to the national park sign. I mean, that's the biggest thing that people who go to at least come here, but I think that's true for across the country. They go and get their picture next to the sign. They get their passport stamped. And then they may come for other reasons. And I know Liz was telling me about going to a bunch of national parks because her daughter or her children want to do junior ranger badges. That's what this is showing you here, where children can do a series of puzzles or, quizzes or questing, and then they will be sworn in as a junior ranger. And it's a hugely popular part of visiting a national park. And so we do have people coming and doing all of those things. But we tend to be a flyover park. People tend to see you as they're going past on I-80 or something. They see National Park. Oh, let's go there. Let's do those couple of things. And then they move on. They might come to the orientation center and then say, oh, we'll go see Blue Hen Falls. We'll go see Brandywine Falls. We'll go do one thing. We're not going to get that economic impact and benefit to our gateway communities if we don't get them to stay longer. What they need to do is stay longer. And when I showed you the patchwork of ownership in the first beginning slide, it was originally thought to be a real hindrance. For previous superintendents, this was just always one of the biggest headaches, is that you didn't have full ownership of all the land within your boundary, and it seemed like there were always conflicts and always problems. And I'd like us to turn that around a little bit and look at it as a strength. What we have inside the boundary of this national park, owned by other people maybe, are a huge range of other ways that people can recreate in this area. With 2 ski resorts on the inside, Vail resorts on the inside. We have Hale Farm and Village, for example. We have Blossom, where people can go and hear concerts by the Cleveland Orchestra. And we have a scenic railroad where they can do day-long excursions or other kinds of special events on that train. Those are just to name a few. And then we do have other ways, and the metro parks themselves offer a whole range of things. If we can attract people in through packaging, through visitor services, visitor bureaus, tourism bureaus, and start to offer national park packages, and then our gateway communities can start to cater to those visitors with overnight accommodations, restaurants, essentially, and other services. That's how this national park is going to bring those national park expectations and impacts and benefits to our gateway communities. And that is when we have fully realized our potential as a national park and brought national parks to the people. That's our goal as we enter our 50th year and beyond. And with that, I will say thank you. And if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
When property becomes available as privately held, whether it's embedded or contiguous and so on, are you always a player in that process? Always interested in it. So we use eminent domain.
First part, we can, but first part of that is, yes, we are usually interested if a party comes forward and says they are interested in selling to the national park, which does happen fairly regularly. Luckily and thankfully, we usually don't use eminent domain. In the early part of the park, early time of the park, there was kind of a threat of eminent domain, but we purchased at fair market value all of the properties that we own in federal ownership. There was a lot of conflict about that at that time, again, in 1970s, because the people, as we can all understand, it's not eminent domain, and we were paying them fair market value, but they didn't want to necessarily leave. They didn't necessarily want to sell. So that's a gray area of eminent domain, you know. So we can certainly say we didn't use it, but the federal government was a bit overbearing in the early days. And so we are still dealing with that. And we are still trying to kind of rectify that. And that's another impetus for me, and I'm not going off topic too much, but for me, in the back of my mind, I truly want to change that sentiment as well. I want the benefits of this national park to be highlighted and understood and appreciated, because I think in spite of that bad beginning, we have grown into something that is very valuable, even for the residents of those communities who suffered during that time. And I hope that we can demonstrate that. But yes, we still have property owners who it's really their hope to sell to us, and we will work with them to the extent we can. We often use third-party entities, conservancies, either Conservancy for Cuyahoga Valley or West Creek Conservancy and other land conservancies to help us with that transaction. It's sometimes clunky and difficult. I know that's hard to imagine with the federal government, but we usually rely on partners to help us through that.
Lisa, thanks for coming. Do you have any lodges or other hotel-like accommodations within the park?
We don't have any yet. No lodges. There's actually been conversations going on as we plan for the new area, which was a former golf course in the center of the park. There's been talk of how to maybe incorporate overnight accommodations onto that property. We do have one leased property, which is a bed and breakfast, the Inn at Brandywine Falls, which we've had for a long time. But we lease to a private owner who then offers those overnight accommodations. We also did have some camping, but no, those are the concepts. Again, another expectation of a national park visitor is that lodge, that some place like that. If we can work on that through partnerships, it's probable that we will be more successful than if we try to concession or have a concession of a lodge ourselves on our property. So I tend to move toward partnerships, having other people on their property provide those and gain the benefits of that sort of thing. But that's all still being discussed with the Conservancy, especially for that one property. I will add, we do have, the Great American Outdoors Act was passed a couple of years ago in order to help federal agencies with their deferred maintenance, all the maintenance backlog, all the infrastructure that we have that we couldn't really take care of very effectively. We didn't have the funds. And we at this national park have been receiving some of those funds for various things. One of our requests is to be able to remove some of the dilapidated buildings that we cannot maintain, and then to put funds also into our more significant historic buildings. And we have probably 10 properties that are high significance historically. And we would turn those around after we rehabilitate them to be leased. And in that case, that would be, those are great opportunities for overnight accommodations, restaurants. You know, we would lease those for that kind of public facing service. So that's another avenue we're exploring. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Lisa, for visiting us today, giving us an update on the park. What a great asset that is for Gorgeous, Ohio. And I didn't really realize that we should put the map up there, how big it actually is and all the things that you have to offer. So thank you. In appreciation of your time with us today, we have this rendition of our Rotary wheel with our 4-way test on the back, and these are made locally in the village network.
Good. Thank you so much.
Couple quick reminders, board members, we are meeting this Wednesday for our May board meeting. Next week, our speaker will be Justin Starr. He will be talking about Wooster Spring Run residential development. And also I will be out next week. Have my day job. I do have a day job. I have a commitment. So Greg is going to fill in for me next week. The following Monday after that, of course, is Memorial Day. So I will see you all back on June 6th. So have a great week, Rotarians. We stand adjourned.